Okay, so I'm going to put a review of the 2025 Frankenstein, the movie, on my Patreon this week. So if you're curious about it, go ahead and support me on Patreon if you can. But in this video, I'm going to do a little bit more of an ideological analysis, which is a little bit more pertinent actually to the modern times, and it actually addresses a wider audience, I do believe, because of course not everybody cares about individual movies, but many people probably have already started wondering, and probably some have been wondering for a while, what happened to the film industry, what happened to most entertainment industries, why do we receive such pieces of work that are of low quality, that are very derivative, that are very boring and lazy, etc. And that is because of capitalism. That's the short answer. The longer answer is that the material circumstances are going to dictate the ideology. Of course, again, another banal truth for anyone who studied capitalism, socialism, and communism even for a few minutes would know. But then the examples that I'm going to provide hopefully are going to help you kind of make sense of it. And it is not just that everything becomes worse under capitalism. It is not just capitalism touches everything with its dirty hand and it becomes rotten, whatever it touches. It is that the people who make entertainment media, the people who make pieces of art, they are inevitably going to follow the money. They're inevitably going to succumb to the pressure of the sponsors. They're going to succumb to the modern ideals, and the modern ideals being make as much as you can, make it as fast as you can, and insert as many bits and pieces that are now trending. And also, who cares about the meaning? Who cares about good storytelling? Who cares about cohesion? Who cares about any kind of value outside of monetary value in any piece of work? And of course, most of the people nowadays who watch movies or play games or consume any other entertainment media most likely are going to agree with this statement, even if they do not criticize capitalism per se. But this is inevitable under capitalism. And one example that I'm going to provide for you is this guy. He is a very famous Russian, former Soviet film director. His name is Sergei Mikhalkov. Right, I think his last name is Mikhalkov, that's for sure. The fact of the matter is his father was great artist, actually. And when Mikhalkov was working in the Soviet Union, he produced some of the most amazing pieces of cinematography one can encounter. One of my all-time favorite movies is this one. It is beautiful. It is such an amazing, tender, touching piece of fiction. It is loosely based off of some actual events that took place in the early formation of the Soviet Union. The issue portrayed in the movie actually was pretty common, but it is an amazing movie about relationships between people. It is an amazing story about friendship, about loyalty, etc. And he went on to make more beautiful, amazing movies. Now, he continued working during the capitalist period, and to this day, I think this guy continues to do his work. And what he makes now is absolutely, astoundingly, ideologically in line with capitalism. He tells trash, sad stories about nothing. They're absolutely not worth your time. They are bad. They're bad pieces of media. And there is a lot of criticism that is actually present in the Russian-speaking communities across the world who really hate this guy. Most of the people I talk to, they all hate the guy because he makes terrible movies, yet he still receives a lot of funds from the pretty prominent sponsors, the government-affiliated sponsors in Russia, and he pretty openly spoke about this during his interviews and whatnot. He would pretty blatantly, openly tell his audience that he doesn't care, that it's the money that he cares about. He is going to make whatever he wants to make, and it doesn't really matter whether it makes sense or anybody likes it, etc. So he became a free artist all of a sudden in the capitalist world. So the person who was able to tell beautiful, tender stories in the past now tells stories of sad trash. it is not necessarily because the person became worse. It is just that the material conditions now dictate how he acts. And every single artist is going to be pushed to make very, very tough decisions. Either you follow the money, you follow whatever the sponsors tell you, and they may actually prescribe you with a set of actors, with the script, etc., etc. You may not even, as a director, get a lot of liberties in choosing what it is you can or cannot make. So you're basically a puppet. And then you either choose this path, and also in order to gain sponsorships and financing of any source, you have to actually, do a lot of work still. Or if you do not do that, if you do not seek out sponsorships and financing, you're going to most likely be doomed to obscurity. You're not going to be able to create much because you won't have the funds. So a lot of actual artists are now in complete obscurity because nobody is there to offer them money to make anything, and they struggle just like everyone else to make ends meet. And this is the story for all art forms. And of course, people who have touched upon the history of art will know that this used to be the case during feudal times as well. Unless you were lucky enough to be noticed by some rich sponsor, you're not going to make it in the world of art. And it remains to be true to this day. However, the Soviet Union and some of the other projects, the socialist projects, they showcase to us that when the material circumstances change, immediately the art becomes different. Of course, there are a lot of people out there who believe that most of the Soviet Union art was propaganda, and much of it was. However, propaganda doesn't have to be bad art. A lot of propaganda is beautiful, amazing art. Once you watch it or read it or get exposed to it in any other way, you're going to understand that propaganda absolutely has its place. And also, not all propaganda is bad. Just as I keep on saying, there are so many pieces of propaganda that on their own can stand and even withstand the test of time. There have been so many pieces of art created in the Soviet Union that still to this day remain unchallenged, remain absolutely beautiful, amazing pieces of art that can be appreciated by different generations, even the generations that were raised by the Red Scare. People cannot deny the artistic value of many of these pieces of work. That does not mean, of course, that there wasn't bad art in the Soviet Union. Of course, there was. It is not that, as soon as we reach socialism, which we, by the different interpretations of the Soviet project, some may say the Soviet Union never even reached. But it's not like during the socialist period we're all of a sudden going to start making the most amazing pieces of everything, right? Because it takes time. It's not going to happen overnight. Generations will have to take place before we are able to build communism. And even during the communist times, there will be new contradictions and new conflicts that will need resolution and will need to develop into the next version of itself. And of course, art is not going to be an exception. But overall, capitalism creates conditions in which the artists are going to be pushed to make poorer decisions. They're going to be pushed to basically become the most cynical versions of themselves, where they kind of betray their own ideals and they have to follow the whims of the sponsors and they have to follow the whims of the crowds, etc., etc. Peter Jackson is a good example of this, I believe. If you haven't watched Lindsay Ellis's documentary on The Hobbit, run right now, drop everything and run and watch it right now, because it depicts so many different aspects of the failure that is The Hobbit, including the fact that Peter Jackson came into the project pretty late and he was not able to remedy the project. The project still ended up being a total mess. But again, he did that because if he wasn't going to do that, then somebody else would, and this somebody else would take the credit and the money, right? So Peter Jackson committed himself to this absolutely horrendous project, and he created that atrocity that is The Hobbit, and now he has his name attached to it, and he is no longer just remembered for The Lord of the Rings, which was still a pretty amazing, masterful piece of work that is going to be remembered fondly by many. Yet he really stained his name and his reputation by the creation of this atrocity of The Hobbit. And it isn't necessarily his personal fault. It is that the artists nowadays are going to be pushed to make such decisions. Most of the artists nowadays, it's not like they can just do whatever they want. They can do whatever they want without any money behind closed doors, and nobody will ever get exposed to it unless they get lucky on social media and whatnot. But otherwise, the artists are going to make the decisions that make sense in the moment, and those decisions will often be pragmatic and based off of the demands of the current modern ideology. And the modern ideology cares about profit and profit only. So everything that is made nowadays is not art. Most of it is products. It is commodities to be sold. It is not so you can get an experience of a lifetime. It is not that you get any kind of an experience at all. It is so that you pay the money to get exposed to a certain piece of art, and then you get to become a part of the fandom and buy all of the bits and pieces that are associated with this piece of art. And that's it. That's the end of the story. They only want your money and nothing else. They don't care for your soul anymore. They don't care for vibes even. All they care about is the profit. So every single artist, even the greatest artist of our time, is going to necessarily succumb to the demands of the modern ideology. And so they will sooner rather than later produce trash. This is why we should not care too much about modern artists. Of course, we can still enjoy pieces of art that we get exposed to every now and again. And I do still enjoy a lot of modern art. Sometimes there's some little spicks of genius that you can find. Usually it's going to be something a little bit more underground, something a little bit more niche, but sometimes even the mainstream media may produce accidentally some brilliant depictions of the truth. Now, more often than not, however, most modern art is going to be at best mediocre. And I've already talked about how the art is destined to fail under capitalism. But if we want true art to have a voice again, if we want real artists to actually have the stage and be able to express themselves, we have to build socialist and communist projects. There is no way around it. Art is going to get continuously, progressively worse, and it's going to be the scenario of Fahrenheit, the book that I keep on recommending you read if you want a good piece of science fiction. You will only see absolutely nonsensical, incomprehensible pieces of sad trash again and again and again in the modern conditions. It is inevitable. It is only going to get worse. We are living in our own version of idiocracy, which is allegedly much worse, and we have no saviors to come and rescue us. We have to do it ourselves. So if you're a young artist or an aspiring artist, even if you're an old one, know that you're not heard not because of your lack of effort or your lack of talent. It is because nobody really cares about art nowadays. What people care about is chasing profit. And the audiences, unfortunately, get raised similarly. What we are continuously given, what is shoved into our faces, is all of this subpar, mediocre, incomprehensible pieces of the so-called art. And of course, in this mess, it is very, very hard to hear the voices of true artists. But once we start building socialist and communist projects, it is going to change slowly but surely, and not necessarily as slowly as it may appear. So this is why you've got to start organizing with the like-minded people for an actual true change, so that true art can reign once again, as it did for a brief period of time during the Soviet Union. So let me know what you think. Consider supporting me on Patreon. Do take care of yourself and your community first. Subscribe to me on all the other social medias, even though I don't do much there. I hope you have a great day today, and I'll talk to you sometime later.